Where am I? What is this parking lot? Am I in a Target? Am I at a Walmart? No, I'm actually in the country of Kazakhstan. Myself and two friends decided to spend about 2 weeks traveling around Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. Why these two countries, you might be asking? I came to prove myself to be the ultimate champion, to get high scores on all the punching bag machines that they have on, no joke, nearly every street corner, in order to properly prepare myself to face the ultimate Kyrgyz fighter at the end of this video. My friends and I like to travel the path less traveled. It's why we went to Papua New Guinea and Madagascar together. And from the beautiful pictures and videos that we've seen of Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, and our endless search to find the perfect campsite, a trip to lands where people still live a nomadic lifestyle sounded perfect to us. But calling Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan the path less traveled isn't quite right. These two countries were historically a part of the Silk Road, an ancient network of trade routes that connected China to Europe and the Middle East. Thousands of people traveled these areas every year to facilitate the trade of goods like silk, spices, and precious metals, and to share culture. And while we didn't come to this area to trade, liar, we did come to experience this nomadic life like the millions of merchants did over the course of 1,500 years. So we rented a car, one that could actually drive. And we gathered only necessary supplies that could help us survive in these historic, vast, nomadic lands. These are the essentials. But the question remained, would 3 boys in men's bodies be able to find the ever-elusive, perfect campsite in countries where we didn't speak the language and didn't know a ton about? Our first stop to try and answer this question was Lake Issyk, a beautiful blue lake formed 8,000 to 10,000 years ago by a massive landslide that created a dam, trapping in the mystical water of the Issyk River. I had seen some info on Reddit claiming that one could camp right next to this lake. Well, we just got to Lake Issyk, and it certainly is more touristy than we thought. We're not sure that we're going to be able to find a spot to camp, or even if we can camp around the lake. We thought we wouldn't see people for miles, and that turned out not to be the case. Not only that, there was no flat ground where we could pitch our tents. My faith in the most trustworthy of news sites as far as where we could and couldn't camp would be tested even more as this trip went on. Therefore, we resorted to doing something taboo that seems to be all too common in places we've traveled, agreeing to a bit of bribery. Should ask him where we parked the car.
We're not far from the parking lot, right?
Behind the lakes, there, Arashan place. Okay. With a bit of Google Translate and some cash, this park ranger told us that we could in fact camp by the lake, but he wasn't entirely forthcoming. It turns out, camping literally right next to the lake not only leaves us out in the open for prying eyes and requires us to set up camp on muddier ground, but we'd also have to ditch the car and actually exercise to bring all of our things from the car to the campsite. Actual exercise, can you believe it? So we opted for this more secluded spot on the Issyk River. Hello! Hi, horsey! Did that scare you or what?
So the Kazakh people eat a lot of horse meat, surprisingly. Perhaps horses just run around here like kangaroos in Australia, but here we have some maybe like beef jerky horse meat. Sorry, Mom. Sorry, Nico's mom. Okay. I mean, it tastes to me just like some type of beef sausage. I don't even taste much game taste. I'm not very gamey, yeah.
With the sun beaming down at the start of a new day, I cooked us some breakfast that would put Gordon Ramsay to shame.
Oh my God.
And we hit the road, ready to explore another one of Kazakhstan's many beautiful landscapes. It's the 9th biggest country in the world after all, and it certainly has it all. Mountains, grasslands, lakes, plateaus, forests, and what we're heading to, it's deserts and valleys. Perhaps we'd find the perfect campsite there. Okay, we have a proposition for you. How about 3,000 for 15 shots?
For 15 shots?
With the old style bow.
We'll have a fixed price.
You have a fixed price?
Yes.
What if we give you a little bit of vodka? One of Kazakhstan's many famous landmarks is Charyn Canyon, a 96-mile long, 12-million-year-old natural beauty that is often called the Grand Canyon of Central Asia. And it gets its name from this guy, the Charyn River. Having grown up in Las Vegas, Nevada, I can't say that I appreciate landscapes like these as much as I do mountains and forests, but it does make me feel like I'm home. And when you're 7,000 miles away, having something that reminds you of the place you grew up in is pretty comforting. But because of how touristy this area is, we decided to continue driving in search of our perfect campsite. Little did we know that we would stumble across something that is illegal in this country and in many countries. We were trying to find a place to camp by this river, and it didn't seem like we could get through this one gated road, and we thought we were a little screwed, but we went back here and asked this guy that has a shop right here. We asked him if he knows anyone that can open the gate and would let us stay by the river, and he pointed to himself, and so pay him 2,000 and then we can pull the car up and camp by the river. Turns out that we almost had 2,000 in coins, but not quite the full amount. So we also offered him the rest of a bottle of vodka. And just like that, with a little bit of bartering, we made our way through private land to set up shop. But because the brush by the river was so thick, and because we wanted a more elevated view of the canyon, we chose a spot slightly away from the river. Unfortunately, this did not qualify as the perfect campsite. Our tents were on rocky and sloped ground, but the area around it was unbelievably gorgeous. After exploring the area with childlike excitement, we came across something that would land us in jail in many countries, including this one. I'm gonna call it oregano, just for this video.
And I know it doesn't look like it, but trust me, you can smell it. This is
oregano. This would not be the first time we'd come across wild oregano on this trip. It is illegal to use in this country, but it grows rampant here. After a nice night along the campfire with the moon shining bright on the canyon, we set out on the long drive to the famous Kaindy Lake. But before we could even get ourselves excited, we had a big problem that was holding our minds hostage. We are on half a tank of gas, and that definitely worries us because we're not sure if we're gonna find a gas station close by. We probably should have got some gas along the way, but we will find out. We'll see what happens. Running out of gas in this part of the country would not be good. And if the car does run out, the three of us would have to hitchhike with all of our stuff to find some fuel. So we had to pull off to the side of the road because there's wild horses everywhere, and we see this little herd of wild horses, if that's what you would call them. I'm not sure if it's a herd, but let's see if I can feed him this apple. This guy seems the friendliest. They don't seem to want it. These awesome moments didn't change the fact that we were now running on empty. Well, we think we may have found a gas station. This would save us the potential of getting stuck in the middle of nowhere. Is this it? Oh my, not promising, but we'll see. Oh, nice. There is a person in the thing. I think we're gonna get gas. Yes, we're not gonna die. Boy, am I dramatic. Kazakhstan animals, not a fan of me. The drive up to Kaindy Lake was breathtaking. We drove on a dirt road nestled in a valley. We drove through rivers, while these huge snow-capped mountains loomed in the distance. Wow, no way. Oh, what do you think? You think that is the bridge we take? It looks pretty stable. Most people travel Kazakhstan in some kind of tour group, usually with their own driver who knows the terrain. We, on the other hand, do not know the terrain.
Well, we're thinking then we have to come along this edge. That's deep right in here.
We waited to follow the example of someone who knows what they're doing, and we went for it. But the same thing that happened at the first lake also happened at this lake. We thought we could camp right by it, per the suggestion of the amazing news source Reddit.
So, change of plans. We are currently going to set up camp in a spot that has a view of these mountains in the back, and we can also have a campfire and have a little bit of privacy.
But turns out, we could not. The spot was a fairly good one. A bit flatter and less rocky than the last campsite. It had nice grass to pitch our tents on, and it had a gorgeous view of the snow-capped mountains in the distance. But it was definitely too close to the main dirt road, and that turned out to be a problem that night.
Well, last night we were around the campfire and we just noticed these three guys start to walk up surrounding us. The main guy was basically saying, like, signaling to us no fire, basically that we can't be there. But in the end, all they of course wanted was money. So we did a little Google Translate and stuff, and he was like 5,000. And so I said, okay, so 5,000 and we can stay and also have the fire? And he said, yes. And then he also pointed to my Coca-Cola and he was like, I don't want that. So he drank my half-drank Coke, and then we threw him an apple as well. But it's those moments like that that make these camping adventures pretty interesting.
In 1911, a 7.7 magnitude earthquake blocked a river in this valley, creating a natural dam, which formed what's now known as Kaindy Lake. I'd go so far as to say it's one of the most mystical lakes on Earth, certainly that I've ever been to. Spruce trees that stood tall in this valley were swallowed by the buildup of water after the earthquake, and they've been sticking up out of the water like masts of sunken wooden ships ever since. Just like Lake Issyk, the mineral deposits in this lake give it a beautiful turquoise hue. Usually this is better seen with sunlight, but we weren't graced with much of that on this cloudy day. After teaching some local Kazakh people how to throw a Nerf football, we continued on to another set of lakes about 1.5 hours away, where our chance of finding the perfect campsite might be greater.
So this should be interesting. We're heading to the second Kolsai Lake, which is an 8-kilometer hike, so about like 5 miles. And it's raining a little bit, so we'll see what happens here. Fingers crossed in that area we're good and that it's clear.
And it certainly was not clear. About an hour in of hiking, we weren't sure if we locked the car or not. I wish I had footage of these moments, but we were drenched, frustrated, and my friend Nico had to go all the way back to check if the car was locked. And because of this whole fiasco, we ended up setting camp at the end of the first lake, only for it to end up being the worst campsite of the trip.
My legs are getting soaked.
So here we are under our nice pine tree at our gorgeous campsite with lots of rain.
Yep.
And our fire has a nice little roof over top.
Kind of sucks.
Oh, and also, the car was locked, if you were wondering. The long hike was grueling with all the weight of our stuff, but it really was beautiful. Kind of felt like we were taking the ring to Mordor, I gotta be honest. And all the burning in my legs and horse poop on my shoes from tourists that took the coward's way out by using horses ended up being worth it when the second lake came into view. Other than the lack of firewood and the cold night ahead, this was quite possibly the perfect campsite. Flat, grassy ground by a gorgeous lake and 2 random dogs that became our best buddies. We named this guy Bear, and to be honest, I forget what we named her because Bear took all of our attention. He needed serious medical help. We don't know what happened exactly, but we think he likely got too close to a horse that ended up stepping on his paw. We gave them both as much food as we could, and I did my best to build them a fire with incredibly wet wood and smoking pine needles to keep everyone warm. A few days of no showering, and we decided that this freezing glacial water was our best bet at getting ourselves to not smell like hobbits. We had purchased this little raft at a store in one of the towns. I played around on it for a bit, and we used that to set our soap on as we really quickly washed off in this freezing lake. This is the point where things took a sad and stressful turn. When we arrived at the lake, we asked someone whose dogs these were, and they replied that they're likely the park rangers. Bear needed serious medical attention, but taking him back with us would require him to hop 8 kilometers on 3 legs in really mountainous territory. We decided to make the tough choice of leaving him at the lake for his owner. But he followed, and nothing we could do could get him to stay. So this incredibly tough and injured dog started hopping on 3 legs, following us on the trail back to the first lake. This was not an easy path. It was muddy, it was rocky, and it was up and down for 8 whole kilometers. Near the end of this grueling hike, we stopped and waited for him many times while he gained some energy to continue hopping along. We tried to get him to drink our fresh water, but he wouldn't take it, instead resorting to drinking the murky puddles of mud and horse droppings. With the first lake nearing, and with Bear's pace slowing rapidly, we wondered what we would do when we got to the end. We considered taking him to a vet ourselves, but he decided for himself. Right when we reached the dock on the first lake, Bear collapsed with exhaustion. This is a sad picture, I know, but there is a happier ending. I ran to get him food and fresh water, while Nico and Jared went to ask around to try and find the park ranger that owns him. And my friends, with the help of Google Translate, were somehow able to find the owner around this huge lake.
And now we are kind of chasing the sun, trying to find a campsite. And this is usually how it goes, where we wait till the last minute. And we are trying to use what little bit of sun we have left to get to some barren land on some unknown dirt road. And hopefully at the end of this, there's a peaceful place where we can make camp and conclude our evening and maybe even find some firewood that's not wet.
There's something about trips like these that fade all other worries away that you have in your life. In a very primal way, the chatter in your mind slows down because your only focus is food and shelter. When we woke up the next day, we realized just how beautiful of a spot this truly was. Our last adventure in Kazakhstan before we moved on to Kyrgyzstan led us slightly farther north to one of Kazakhstan's largest national parks, Altyn Arashan. With sand in our shoes, we headed back to Kazakhstan's former capital, Almaty, to return our trusty steed, the Toyota. And the following day, we were in a car that we booked to take us across the border into Kyrgyzstan. But we had no idea where we'd be staying when we got there.
These are the kind of things, although scary for most people, arriving in a foreign country where people don't speak English much and you don't know where you're staying, this is the type of stuff that would freak a lot of people out, but this is invigorating. It makes traveling quite a bit more interesting and novel, and it is easier than people think. You can always find people that'll help out and just figure things out as you go, so.
And it always does seem to work out. We ended up finding some Wi-Fi, and after 6 days of wild camping, we decided to splurge on this nice A-frame cabin up in the mountains. It was about this time that I started to stress over my upcoming fight with the legendary scrapper of Kyrgyzstan. We'd been eating canned food and MREs for the whole trip, so a nice steak helped put some meat on my bones. But I wasn't sure if I'd have the strength and courage to fight one of Kyrgyzstan's greatest. Not only that, but we couldn't find a single driver using this country's version of Uber to take us to our next location. This is where the hero of the trip steps in. There always seems to be one on every trip that we go on. An amazingly friendly local who goes out of their way to help a couple of traveling buffoons. And our hero's name is Max. Out of a stroke of luck, he just so happened to be right next to our Airbnb after we tried ordering a driver for an hour. And not only was he willing to take us to get food for our journey and help arrange a car to our next destination, but we ended up meeting up with him later in the trip and camping with him. We were heading to an absolute gem in Kyrgyzstan, and no joke, one of the prettiest places I've ever been in all of my years of traveling. The only catch? The only way to get there is on one of the bumpiest roads I've ever been on, being driven by an elderly Kyrgyz man who clearly adored fast-paced techno music. The weather from the previous days had followed us though, because when we arrived, we were met with Mother Nature's spitballs.
I feel like I got a welt on my elbow.
Yeah. We set up our tents during a lull in the weather and headed to one of the natural hot springs in this area to warm up.
Well, this morning it was raining, and so we kind of stayed in our tents for a bit, and we thought we weren't going to be able to do what we're going to do next. And what are we doing next, Jared?
We are riding horses up to Ala-Kul. It's a pass in a lake that is, I think it sits at like 4,200 meters.
And that's enough from you. What do you have to say?
Fuck you.
They have followed us.
At this point, we really felt like we were characters in The Lord of the Rings. I, of course, being a mixture of Aragorn, Legolas, and Gandalf, and my friends being mostly Gollum and a slight percentage of Orc. Beautiful wild horses were scattered around in this area, and this whole adventure made me think more and more about how we'd eaten their buddies only a week ago.
Well, we thought the horses were going to take us to the top of the mountain and down to the lake, but we were at lunch and we filled ourselves up probably too much, thinking that we weren't going to be doing any exercise. And then they told us that we had a 2 to 3 hour hike from that lunch spot, and it's not easy. I mean, this is essentially a giant mountain that we have to climb, so wish us luck.
Wow. Ala-Kul Lake, gorgeous turquoise glacial water situated nearly 12,000 feet above sea level in Kyrgyzstan's Ala-Kul National Park. A view well worth the steep 2-hour hike up.
We gotta go down to those little tiny yurts, make our way all the way down there.
At a rather rapid pace that got us down in less than half the time it took to hike up. We hopped back on our now well-rested horses and made the 2-hour trip back to our campsite in Altyn Arashan. After this incredible experience, we weren't sure how it could get any better, but Max gave us the cultural experience we were missing on the trip and graciously invited us to his home where we met his father and toured his amazing garden.
I'm just shocked how big these cabbages are. Look at the size of that. Max helped us out today by picking us up, took us to different supermarkets to get food, and now he took us to this incredible campsite that we have. And you can see if I flip this around, in the distance, in the very distance, we have a snow-capped peak. And then we come to these beautiful red rocks.
This gorgeous rock formation is known as the Seven Bowls. Apparently it's called that because it looks like 7 bowls. But perhaps my imagination lacks the depth needed to see that. This little plateau that we made our campsite was one of the best campsites of the trip. Sitting high above the town of Jediagus, we had a perfect view of the 7 bowls. As someone who spends most of their time in front of a screen, being surrounded by nature like this is a powerful reminder of how grounding and restorative the natural world can be. Our hero Max showed up the following morning to see how we were doing, and once again, he graciously offered to drive us an hour and 30 minutes away to a place called Fairytale Canyon. But as peaceful as our surroundings were, we still had a challenge ahead. Figuring out how to get to Kyrgyzstan's capital, Bishkek, a 6-hour journey with no clear plan. Over thousands of years, wind and water have sculpted the sandstone in this area into breathtaking rock formations, resembling the spines of a sleeping dragon emerging from the earth. But best of all, this magical place is situated right next to what's called the Pearl of Central Asia, Issyk Lake. We decided that making camp by the 2nd largest mountain lake in the world and the 9th deepest would be a great choice for our last campsite of the trip. And because this was one of the most important and strategic spots for travelers passing along the Silk Road, it was only fitting that we ended here.
So we were a bit worried. We didn't know how we would end up going from where we are now to Bishkek tomorrow morning, because we thought that our buddy Max here would return back home and we would have to maybe hitchhike somewhere and find a ride back to Bishkek. But he said yes to taking us to Bishkek. And because he doesn't want to drive back to his town, he is hanging out with us. We're gonna have a nice big bonfire. He helped me. He did most of it, but we cut down a dead branch. So we have tons of wood. We're gonna set up, it was basically a giant tree. And we got these sticks. I'm gonna do the string lights. It's gonna be very pretty and should be a nice campsite. And you can see our tent set up here, and in the distance there are the snow-capped mountains, which is very beautiful.
And while it was a beautiful night with great friends and great food, something not great was happening only 40 feet away from us.
Last night, guess what happened? We go back to go to sleep, and Jared says, my whole freaking tent is missing. His tent, we think, flew away with the wind somewhere down this beach, likely into the water, and we just don't know where it was. So he slept with Nico last night. I heard some noises. I'm not gonna say anything, because look at my tent currently, and it has like 50 pounds of stuff in it that's holding it in.
There's always something that happens to Jared on trips like these, and while he didn't find his long-lost kite of a tent, he did find some of his other belongings that washed up along the shore.
Wow.
The inflated pillow and the inflated
Wow. And the freeze-dried meals.
The mango sticky rice still lives.
Wow.
In the poop bag. In the tent bag randomly.
Here you go, sir.
Our journey to Bishkek, the capital of Kyrgyzstan, was a relaxing one, but my nerves were building. I knew I still had to face one of Kyrgyzstan's most ferocious fighters. The time had finally come. There he was, standing 3 feet 7 inches tall with a reach of 38 inches. He pounced out of his corner with a stare down that made me question all my life's choices I had made up until this point. To say I was shaken in this moment would be an understatement. He postured up, beckoning me to come meet my demise. It was in these tense moments that I thought back to our buddy Bear. The courage and strength that brave dog showed was such an inspiration to all 3 of us. and I started channeling Bear's energy to face this legendary warrior. The blows he was delivering were massive. I realized that going toe-to-toe with him in stand-up was futile, and I decided to execute a double hip takedown. I had done it, and the up kick after the bell just showed the courageous fighter's frustration with his defeat. He fought valiantly though, and continued to try and go for some sort of armbar, even though the bout had finished. Trips like these are ones I suggest everyone take if they can. They pull you out of your comfort zone, connect you with people whose lives are completely different from your own, and broaden your view of the world in ways you never expect. From the incredible kindness of strangers like Max, to finding inspiration in animals like Bear, this journey reminded me that adventure isn't just about finding the perfect campsite or conquering Kyrgyzstan's fiercest fighter. It's about the people, the moments, and the stories that stay with you long after the trip is over.
What a big sexy time.
You come back more grounded, more grateful, and with a greater appreciation for how vast, wild, and beautiful life really is.